Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Um, Probably going to be a short one today. I didn't sleep a lot last night. Yesterday someone tried to kill my president. Someone shot Donald Trump. And had he not, by the grace of God, turned his head at a second difference, and he would be dead. I'm angry. Um, I know I have a diverse audience. I don't talk a lot of politics, but Donald Trump's the only president in my lifetime that never started a war. Donald Trump's the only president in my lifetime that seemed to give a damn about the American people. I'm very pro-life. I believe abortion is utterly evil, probably the most evil thing there is in this entire world. Um, Donald Trump's the only one that ever appointed justices to overturn Roe v. Wade. I mean, George Bush, John McCain, Bob Dole, they never even went to the March for Life rallies. Okay, it was all talk, no action. Um, the next most evil thing in the world would be the trafficking of children for sexual abuse. Donald Trump put a stop to that during the last year or two of his presidency. He made sure that people coming across the border with children were their actual relatives. Yeah, he separated children from their parents sometimes. But what he also did was separate tens of thousands of children from human traffickers to were turning them into sex slaves. Biden administration is now admitting they have lost 86,000 children who are probably being abused right this very moment. I will tell you the God's honest truth. Liberalism, leftism, whatever you want to call it, is a mental disease that is suicidal at its core. And I utterly oppose it. I don't make a secret of that. I utterly oppose everything left, liberal, woke, progressive, because I can look at history and see 200 million deaths under communism and socialism of their own people, and millions more abortions and deaths. And it's all due to liberalism. It's all due to the left. I mean, hundreds of millions of people are dead because of people like the Clintons and the Obamas and Woodrow Wilson and FDR and Margaret Sanger and Karl Marx and Adolf Hitler, who was the head of the National Socialist Party of Germany. Yes, he was a leftist. He was a communist that then became a Nazi, which is a National Socialist. I absolutely hate the liberal ideology. Now, that said, I get along well with everybody. Did you notice there weren't any riots last night? That's right. Someone tried to kill our president. And what did Republican, conservative, libertarian, conservative, independent, conservative, traditional Americans, MAGA people like me do? Prayed. We didn't burn cities down. That's what the left does, okay? You remember the BLM riots? That didn't happen last night, did it? The communists and socialists just won in France. What did they do after they won? They burned France. It is a destructive, hate-filled ideology. And I honestly, I pray for President Biden's safety. I wanted him to be a much better president than he is. Now I want him to get the hell out of there and let the legitimate president take over. But no violence. I'm a Catholic who's opposed to much of what Pope Francis does. Every single morning and evening, I pray for Pope Francis's safety, well-being, and his intentions, even when his intentions are opposed to mine. Okay, if you want to know the main difference between the left and the right, so-called, one burns cities down, and the others pray. And don't you ever bring up to me January 6th again. Those January 6th rioters that were spurred on by FBI agents who were welcomed into the Capitol got out of control. It became a riot. It did. They didn't kill a single person, okay? That's a lie when Biden says they killed cops. They didn't kill anybody. Two of them were shot. Well, one of them was shot in cold blood. An unarmed woman was shot by an armed police officer, and another one basically kicked to death, trampled, crying for help, and the Capitol Police killed her. Okay, 2 women died. Those were who died on January 6th. But don't ever bring that up to me again, because I will tell you, July 13, my president was shot. Now, my little rant is over. Frankly, I do think the Secret Service was complicit or absolutely incompetent. They could have stopped it from happening, and they didn't. People should be fired. People should be actually investigated to see if they allowed this to happen. That's not going to happen under the Biden administration. So y'all get all worked up about, Project 2025 or whatever it is. Yeah, I'm telling you, a lot of people need to be fired. A lot of people need to be fired. We could start with like 80,000 IRS agents. We could start with a lot of FBI and CIA, the people that, and all those that did the fake Steele dossier and the Russia hoax. We could start with those who who called Hunter Biden's laptop Russian disinformation when it had evidence of really bad stuff. I'm just going to say really bad stuff. What did I say one of the greatest evils is sexual abuse of children? Don't talk to me about decency if you're a Democrat. Anyway, let me get on with the herbs. Let me get on with the herbs and plants. I'm sorry, y'all. I am angry. I am absolutely angry. And, I'm from North Carolina. I grew up in a Democrat family. I know that Democrats do cheat in elections, and I know how they cheat in elections. I live in a basically 99% Republican district. There's not a lot I can do, and that's frustrating. My area will vote to reelect Donald Trump. If you live in a swing district, if you live in a liberal district, if you give a damn about this country and human life, I hope you're as angry as I am. And what you can do, you can sign up, I think it's Trump Force, whatever, 46 or something, whatever presidential number he'll be, check that out. You can go to the precinct strategy. There are very many sites, a lot of them associated with Steve Bannon, who's sitting an admitted political prisoner. I think what Washington Post even called him that, or was it Washington Times? Sitting in prison right now because he dared challenge the Democrat fascists. I'm going to sort of call them dim fascists. They're basically Nazis that run this country. But here's what you do. Like I said, I grew up in a political family of Democrats. You know how we won elections legitimately? This is something Republicans never do, and I don't understand this. I have worked on campaigns for Republicans. I have essentially run campaigns for Republicans. A Republican will go out there and say, vote for me because this is what I stand for. And that's it. And he expects everyone to come vote for him. He might hold a fundraiser. I've cooked barbecue for him before. That does not win elections. You know what Democrats do? They go around their neighborhood and they knock on every door. And they say, I am your neighbor and I will be voting for so-and-so. And this is why. Let me tell you why I support this person. They're one-on-one contact with people. They show up at high school football games and baseball games. They show up at every family reunion and funeral they can find, okay? They show up. When they legitimately win, it's because they do what's called retail politics. They shake hands, they talk with people. They, when someone has a concern, they write their name down, they write their concern down, they write their phone number and email address down and say, when I'm in office, I'm going to help you with this, or if I don't make it, I'm still going to contact so-and-so and ask them to help you. You know, that's how you actually get elected legitimately. Now, in North Carolina, we have a long history of ballot boxes going missing like 2 hours before the polls close and wandering around the county and $100 bills being put in people's pocket. That's called walking around money. If you don't believe me, I've got a relative in jail right now for doing that, okay? Actually, I think he just died. Yeah, he went to jail for it. Anyway, um, it's not the same. If you want to see President Trump elected, which I am praying for and hoping with every fiber of my being he will be, and a huge Republican majority in the House and Senate to undo the godless socialist programs of the Democrats, you need to do that very thing. Walk around and talk with your neighbors. Talk with people in the grocery store. Talk with people in church. You go to church, talk with every single person in that church. You can get information from the candidates. You can get information from the Republican Party. If you want what's called a palm card, it will tell the person like who's on the ballot and what they stand for. You can hand that out to every single person. On and leading up to Election Day, as soon as early voting starts in your community, contact those people again and say, have you voted? If they haven't voted, offer to drive them to the polls. If it's legal in your state, and it is in some, and they're going to do an absentee ballot, offer to take it to the post office for them. That is not legal in several states for obvious reasons. It leads to voter fraud. But if it's legal in your state, offer to do that. Do you have a retirement home in your community? Go in and talk to every single resident of that retirement home and make sure they fill out absentee ballots and make sure they get mailed. Because you know what? If you don't, someone's going to go in and do it for them, and they're going to be 99% Democrat votes. That's how the Democrats win. They cheat, okay? They get the graveyard vote, and they get the nursing home vote. That means, yeah, dead people voting because they make sure they're not taken off the voter rolls. I mean, here in North Carolina, look, I can tell you stories that would raise the hair on the back of your neck. I mean, I can tell you stories that would make you spitting, cussing mad. If you want the legitimate president of the United States back in office, who is Donald John Trump, this is how you win. You go and talk to your neighbors, to everyone who attends your church, to everyone at your workplace, to everyone at your kid's school. Go into those nursing homes. Those people are lonely in the first place. I mean, for the love of God, I mean, if you've got a spare second, go in and take them a little gift. And I mean, even if it's not political, I mean, nursing homes are horribly abusive places where people send their relatives to die in loneliness and despair, okay? Go in and just talk with them, okay? Talk with them. And if someone says, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden, you say, okay, tell me why. If they tell you why and they really believe it, and I mean, you know what? It's their right to. You don't have to change their mind. Help them vote as well. I mean, hopefully they won't, but I mean, I'm just saying, speak from the heart and tell them why you support the candidate of your choice, okay? If you're listening to this, and you're a Democrat, I just gave you great advice on how to win the election. I don't care. If you sincerely and honestly believe that Joe Biden is a better president, even though he's a brain dead, desiccated moron, a walking corpse who is only in office between 8 a.m. and 4, or was it 8 a.m. and 6? I don't even remember. You know what? If a nuclear attack comes at 4 in the morning and he's got about 9 minutes average to respond, it's not going to happen. We're dead. Okay? I think you could explain to any person in a retirement home that remembers the Cuban Missile Crisis why you might not want that guy in office. But again, the way to win an election is to talk with your neighbors one-on-one. And when it comes time to vote, say, have you voted? If not, how can I help you? How can I legally help you? You do that, it's a game changer. That's how it's called. Democrats call it organizing, okay? Community organizing. You ever want to know what a community organizer is? You know, that's what Barack Obama used to do, supposedly. That's what a community organizer does. And there are, like I said, this Trump Force, whatever, 40, whatever. They'll help you do that. And your county and state Republican Party should help you do that. Most of them are ridiculously incompetent. They're the ones who sit back and say people vote for us because of our policy platform, and they never bother to reach out to anybody. They're country club Republicans. They don't talk politics with people they don't know. You know, they're polite and they talk about the weather and they talk about, you know, sports and all that to get along. And frankly, a lot of them are absolutely stupid. So don't be surprised if they don't give you much help. But if you're as angry as I am right now, and I am like literally livid, take action. You can actually help fix the problems. You know, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. This is how you can be part of the solution. So y'all, again, I know I have a diverse audience, and a lot of y'all are hating me because I say I support Trump, and I'm telling people how to help him get elected. I don't freaking care, okay? Someone tried to kill my president last night. The line has been crossed. Now, let's get on. About herbs. We will start with our edible plant, as we usually do. This comes from my book, Spring Foraging Cookbook. And thank you, whoever gave it a review on Amazon. It's amazing. Some of my books will get like dozens of reviews. And this one, nobody would put a review on it. Somebody gave me 5 stars. I appreciate it. Maybe it was 4 stars. I don't even care. But thank you for taking the time and effort to do it. It really helps an author when you give them a good review on Amazon. If you want to give me a negative review, can I just ask if you email me first or contact me? Yeah, you just email me, you know, judson@judsoncarroll.com. Tell me what your complaint is and give me a chance to address it before you trash me on Amazon, because bad reviews really do cost an author their living. You're taking the food out of my mouth. So if you would just contact me and say, you know, I have a question, I have a comment, I have a complaint about this. You know, maybe it's something I can actually fix. If there's a real issue, I can go in and revise it and resubmit the manuscript. But please, so, you know, if you want to leave reviews, positive reviews, please go ahead and do so. And if it's negative, just contact me first. I don't get angry or upset about criticism. I actually want to know if there's a problem so I can fix it. Again, that's the difference between conservatives and liberals. We actually want to fix things. Anyway, elderflower. Elderflower. Okay, of course you know all about elderberries. Elderberries are great later in the season. I've done shows on elderberries. I mean, wonderful antiviral properties, anti-inflammatory properties, really one of our best herbs. But elderflowers are a spring flower that you can eat. They're really a delicacy, and generally you're just bread and fry them. Make a pancake batter. That's like the easiest thing to do. Dip them in and fry them. Deep fry them in a little oil, and they are absolutely delicious with a little salt. They're just wonderful. Be careful, though. Don't harvest too many elderflowers because for every hour elderflower you take, you will forfeit a berry. So if you harvest all the elderflowers, and I was just talking with an herbalist friend a few months ago, and she said elderflowers got popular. Like maybe somebody did an article in the local newspaper or something about foraging for elderflowers, and somebody went out and wiped out all the elderflowers, and she was really upset. She said, we're not going to have any elderberries this year because somebody took all the flowers. So you got to keep this in perspective. Take a little here and there. Locust flowers are an excellent substitute. So you can actually mix the two. So don't feel like you have to take, all elder flowers. Um, Linden or basswood flowers would be an excellent substitute. Probably a few other things that I might think of as we go along. Okay, you can also make an elderflower cordial or cocktail, and these are very traditional. People have been doing this for hundreds of years. Essentially, they're just made by steeping the flower in wine. Or you can make a syrup of elderflower just as you would dandelion. You just boil it and add some sugar and cook it down. The syrup can be combined with a wine or a liquor, if you want to make a cocktail. And, truth is, I don't have much of a sweet tooth. That's especially true when it comes to alcoholic beverages. I don't like sweet drinks, so I don't like that very much, but you may really love it. I like to steep elderflowers in vinegar and use them to make salad dressing. You can also flavor sugar with elderflowers like you would a vanilla bean. You just take the elderflowers and put them in sugar, dried flowers, of course. The sugar would actually pull the moisture out of the flowers. Sugar is what you call hydroscopic, I think. It will pull water out of something, so it would actually dehydrate the flowers, but then you'd have a mess, so a lumpy mess. So I would take dried flowers and just mix them in and put them in a closed container. I honestly though, I want the berries, so I don't eat a lot of elderflowers. I'm going to wait and use the berries to make wine, and you can make an excellent elderberry wine. Wine is very good. The elderberry wine is very good for the immune system. It has antiviral properties, but it's also, I'm telling you, it's just darn tasty. There's no, I can't give you like a real recipe for wine. As I always say, wine makes itself. Okay, there's yeast on the outside of any berry that when the berry's crushed, it starts converting sugars to alcohol. So you could make it with just crushed berries. Or you can mix in a little sugar. It's up to you. It's up to your taste. A little sugar will give you a higher proof, more alcohol in the wine, but also a sweeter wine, which isn't something that really appeals to me. Now, if you add too much sugar, it will actually slow down the fermentation, and it will result in a very sweet wine that maybe didn't get a lot of alcohol at all. I never do that. What would I give, if I was just to give a ballpark advice? I would not add more than a pound of sugar to, gosh, I wouldn't even go that much. I have seen many recipes that say add a pound of sugar to a gallon of juice. No way I'm going to do that. I wouldn't add more than a cup. That would probably be about right for me. A cup of sugar to a gallon of juice. But, again, it's up to you. You don't have to add water if you just have plenty of elderberry juice. But you can, and that's going to stretch it out. Just remember that the more you add to it in terms of water and sugar, well, the less potent it's going to be medicinally, and probably the less quality it's going to be as a wine on the palate. So, but again, it's up to your taste. You can just crush the berries, but I'd probably stretch it out a little bit. I will add a little water and sugar. I'm just saying I don't go overboard with it. Now, most books would tell you to press and strain the juice off the skins. I consider that to be optional because the skins give a good flavor and color. So what I would do is ferment it for about a month on the skins and then pour the wine off into another container and let it clear. Either way, whatever you do, you're going to have the juice of this berry, and you're going to either add some yeast to it or hope some wild yeast got to it from the skins. You can go to various, any wine and beer company, it's a brew shop or something online, and look for yeast that are specifically good for making cider. I think Lavalin is the one I've used most, and it's going to it's going to work pretty well. Just make sure your juice, if you boiled it down to get the juice, which is an option if you don't have a press, make sure it is cooled to room temperature, no warmer than body temperature. Put it in a vessel that you can seal to keep air out without, while also letting the carbon dioxide out. So you don't want air to come in because it has bacteria in it, which will spoil your wine, but you do want it to release carbon dioxide. There's nothing, I mean, I've come up with so many different ways of doing that, but cheap plastic fermentation airlock shouldn't cost more than $1 or $2. Again, at a brew shop, you can order them from Amazon or eBay. Super easy. Pretty much foolproof. That's what I usually go for. So fill your container, whether it's a gallon jug or a 5-gallon carboy. It just depends on how much you're making, right? Leave some space at the top because the wine is going to really foam at first as that yeast gets really active. You know how yeast foams when you're proofing it to make bread or something. So I would leave head space of maybe a half gallon, okay, and just cover it. At that point, I would put a cloth or a paper towel and rubber band over the top because it's really going to gas off a lot. After a day or so, it's going to settle down. It's going to stop foaming. At that point, it's when I'm really going to top it off with water. Put the airlock on there. Let it go about a month. It should become still. The yeast will essentially die and settle to the bottom. It doesn't really die. It goes dormant. And you keep using that same yeast over and over. That's called the lees or the dregs. At that point, either siphon or pour it off into a fresh, clean container. Cap it again with a fermentation lock. It's going to clear. The more lees that you didn't even know were there will settle to the bottom. And then after at least another 2 weeks, but better another month, you're ready to bottle it. Taste it. Make sure it's dry. Make sure it's not sweet. Certainly make sure it's not bubbly, because bottles that are not made to handle carbonation can explode. But you should be good by then. I mean, it's just sort of a rule of thumb kind of thing. You have to trust your judgment. Yeah, you can get equipment, again, from a brew shop that'll show you how much sugar is still left in there. I think it's a sacrometer. And I can't remember the name of the thing that shows the specific gravity. That's another thing you can do. And another one that'll tell you the alcohol content. Or you can just trust your taste and give it a little experience. And anyway, just put them in bottles, store them in a cool, dark place, because if they get warm, they can start fermenting again and explode. Never do that. And put them in a cool, dark place, and the wine will be ready to drink right away, but it's going to improve. Basically, every month that it's aged, it's going to improve remarkably. And elderberry wine will keep several years. Elderberry wine will probably keep decades. I mean, it's really quite good. And like I said, making wine is not rocket science. The wine makes itself. You know, I've told you the story before. You know, I was up at a certain Southern Baptist university, and they told us that it was a sin to drink any kind of wine. I said, but wait a minute, Jesus made wine. He turned water into wine. And he drank wine at least at the Passover celebration. So you're telling me Jesus sinned? And they're like, no, we don't believe that was really wine. That was grape juice. And I had to explain to them that before pasteurization and before, refrigeration and all this stuff, grape juice would immediately start turning to wine. I mean, the minute that grape is crushed, the yeast starts acting on those sugars, and really most of the alcohol is produced within the first 24 hours. So, Jesus made and drank wine, and I don't care if you don't like that. That's the God's honest truth. That's the facts of science and nature. Anyway, sometimes I get tired of arguing with idiots. Honestly, I do get tired of arguing with idiots, and I usually ignore them, but sometimes I can be a little terse. I can't. Easygoing, good-natured guy, but sometimes I just say, man, you are a freaking idiot. I am not talking to you anymore. That's how I keep my sanity anyway. Now let's talk about the herb of the week. And this is from my book, Weeds and Grasses. Medicinal Weeds and Grasses of the American South. And of course, they grow most everywhere. I just use my region as a reference. And it's fairly common. Definitely common in the mountains where I live. It's Potentilla. Potentilla is what Michael Moore, the herbalist, not the big fat communist, would have called a yarfa. Yet another rose family astringent. Okay, it's a particularly good one though. It's right up there with wild geranium for me. It's often known as cinquefoil. So we have two that grow in my area: Potentilla canadensis, or Canadian or Canada potentilla, and Potentilla recta. And I think that means rough, if I remember correctly. But anyway, they call it dwarf cinquefoil. Actually, running five fingers. No, that's an odd name. But if you look at the leaf pattern, you'll understand it. Rough fruited cinquefoil, sulfur cinquefoil, and sulfur five fingers. I have not really encountered Potentilla recta. I guess it must smell like sulfur. Potentilla canadensis does not, at least not to my nose. So we're going to go with this. But anyway, all the Yarfa family, yet another rose family astringent. Roses, like I said, the geraniums, the potentillas, there's so many. I mean, even blackberries and apples are in the rose family. And, the flowers can be used and the leaves can be used. So there are a lot, in other words. And that's why Michael Moore called them Yarfas. Yet another rose family astringent. Well, as you might guess, these are astringent. So Potentilla is one of the go-to herbs, really one of the most popular in European and American herbal medicine for diarrhea, and really anytime you need a mild astringent. Documented at least as far back as ancient Greece. Dioscorides called it pentaphyllum, and again, that's that five-leaf thing, or five fingers, as they said. And he describes it. As usual, I'm just going to say, go ahead and just Google it, look it up online. He said that it has a long reddish root. That is true. That is of considerable use. A decoction of the root reduced by 1/3 by simmering. That means just simmer it in water until 1/3 of the water is gone. That's what we call a decoction, 1/3 to a half. Decoction held in the mouth is able to relieve toothache. It's the astringent property. It's going to pull out swelling. It's going to help with inflammation. Used as a mouthwash, it stops rotten ulcers in the mouth. Gargled, it relieves roughness of the throat, and taken as a drink, it helps flowing bowels or diarrhea. It helps dysentery and arthritis and sciatica. Again, swollen, inflamed conditions, it reduces inflammation. Pounded finely and boiled in vinegar and applied, it restrains herpes or other viral skin diseases and dissolves swellings, goiters, hardened places, edema, aneurysms, suppurations, erysipelas, which is another skin inflammation, and conjunctivitis, which is also inflammatory, and heals skin lesions from psoriasis. The juice from the tender root is good for disorders of the liver and the lungs and for deadly poisons. It's often included in bitters formulas, by the way. I think it's in the large Swedish bitters, if I remember correctly. The leaves are taken in a drink with honey, water, or diluted in wine, and a little pepper for recurrent fevers. The leaves of 4 little branches are used for paroxysms every 4th day. Now, he says paroxysms every 4th day, and he talks about 3rd day, and I think he's talking tertian fevers, or quatern fevers, malarial type fevers that reoccur regularly. But paroxysm actually means spasm, and almost like a epileptic type of spasm, right? And he actually then says about they help epilepsy taken as a drink for 30 days, and 3 glasses of the juice of the leaves taken as a drink for some days soon cures jaundice. Does it help with epilepsy? Probably not in all cases, but there are probably some cases where it could help. Okay, so I just want to give that with a grain of salt. Let's see. Applied with salt and honey, they heal wounds and fistulas. Taken as a drink or else applied, it helps those who have a broken foreskin or hymen. Okay, I have no idea how that works. Well, I can figure out one. I can't quite figure out the other. I'm just going to put it that way. And it stops flows of blood. It is cut for washing discharges of blood and purification. He actually said that you could carry some form of the plant and it would prevent sickness. I don't really believe that. It helps the eyes. Yes, very, very commonly used as an eye wash, again, to reduce inflammation, soothe the eyes. Good for tumors. Possibly may have been a goiter. That's what the translator wrote in the notes. Hardened tonsils, the uvula, sores of the tongue, and that's that little thing that hangs down the back of your throat. And if it gets inflamed, it can choke you. Actually, it can be pretty dangerous. Actually, sores of the tongue helps the joints, disorders of the nerves, the teeth, and scabies. Scabies is a parasitical itching skin condition. It's also good for drawing down the afterbirth. The decoction poured on the hands is excellent against fears and enchantments. So, if you fear being enchanted, you could use this as a tea on your hands. No idea there. Anyway. And if you did, he says you should gather the herb when the moon increases at the time of the sun's arising. So I guess full moon at before dawn. I don't know. Who knows? He goes on about different, what it was called in different languages of his time. Now, St. Hildegard von Bingen, about 1080, said that cinquefoil helped with strong fevers. She used the herb mixed with flour and olive oil as a poultice for the stomach. For cloudy eyes, she recommended using the herb infused in wine and applying some to the eyelids before sleep. Now, that would help pull the inflammation out of puffy eyes. Makes a lot of sense. Help reduce the mucus that comes from that, In Gerard, 1500s England, he said the decoction of the roots of cinquefoil drunk cureth the bloody flux and all other fluxes of the belly and stauncheth all excessive bleeding. So good for both diarrhea and excessive menstrual bleeding, etc. And astringent, in other words. He said the juice of the root, while they be young and tender, is given to be drunk against the diseases of the liver and lungs and all poison. The same, drunk in mead or honeyed water or wine with some pepper, cureth the tertian and quatern fevers. Okay, so he just cleared up what Dioscorides said, where he called it paroxysms. He is actually talking about the malarial type fevers. The leaves used among herbs appropriate for the same purpose cureth ruptures and bursting of the rim and guts falling into the cods. Well, that sounds perfectly horrible, doesn't it? He means hernias, okay? But yeah, that sounds absolutely horrible. The juice of the leaves drunk doth cure jaundice and comforteth the stomach and liver. The decoction of the root held in the mouth doth mitigate the pain of the teeth, stayeth putrefaction and all putrefied ulcers of the mouth, helpeth the inflammation of the almonds, that's actually the glands in the throat, they call them almonds for some reason, the throat and the parts adjoining. It stayeth the lax and helpeth the bloody flux. The root boiled in vinegar is good against shingles, and appeaseth the rage of fretting sores and cankerous ulcers. That would make sense that it would help with shingles, being as soothing and astringent. He said it is reported that 4 branches hereof cure quartern fevers and 3 tertian, etc. So we won't get into that. He quotes an Italian herbalist or physician who recommended the leaves boiled in water with some lingam vitae. What is the common name for lingam vitae? Wow. All right, just Google it because I'm blanking. I've got this bush right in my backyard, actually. Lignumvita. Arbor vitae. I think it's the American. Anyway, just Google it. Make sure. Okay. So Potentilla leaves and lingam vitae added hereto is used against falling sickness, which again is epilepsy. If the patient be caused to sweat upon taking thereof, he likewise commendeth the extraction of the root against the bloody flux, bloody diarrhea, in other words. So, oddly enough, Culpeper was much less effusive. He said much less about it 100 years later. He said the root possesses a considerable astringency and is excellent in the overflowing of menses, excessive menstrual bleeding, and in bloody stools. Best way of giving it is a powder, and its dose is a scruple. I don't remember what a scruple is. I'd have to look it up. It's a little bit, though. The young leaves used in infusion or diuretic. It is good in intermittent fevers. And from what experience shows of its efficacy and safety, We seem to blame not to pursue our own knowledge in the virtues not only of this but of many other plants of our own growth. Okay, Old English, he's saying that such a good plant and so much used that if people weren't using it at that time, it was their own fault, essentially. Botany, which has of late become a science, much studied for curiosity, deserves to be much more cultivated for use. I love that quote. Yes, that is excellent. I might make note of that and have it put on my tombstone when I die. Botany, which has of late become a science, much studied for curiosity, deserves to be much more cultivated for use. I'd put that with the great George Leonard Herder's quote that people lost in the woods don't die for lack of food, they die for lack of knowledge. One of the reasons I write my foraging cookbooks and my omnivore's guide, we are surrounded by food. We just don't know how to use it. And, shame on us, because the information's out there. We live in the internet age where all the combined knowledge of human history is available at the tap of a couple of keystrokes. Ignorance on just about any subject now is inexcusable. We have more information and less knowledge, less real practical knowledge than probably any time in the history of mankind. We know more stuff, but we know less what matters and how to use it. Common sense, as they would have said. So, Miss Grieve liked to call Potentilla a five-leaf grass. Okay, that's odd. It doesn't look much like grass, but again, it does have 5 leaflets that are slightly hairy and kind of roughly edged. You just have to look for it. This is very interesting. She said that Francis Bacon, said that frogs have a predilection for sitting on this herb. The toad will be much under sage, but frogs will be in cinquefoil. I've never seen a toad under a sage bush or sage plant, and I've never seen a frog under cinquefoil. Being part Cajun and Creole, I would plant plenty of cinquefoil just to have more frog legs to eat, but I don't think so. Anyway, she gives some really interesting history. She talks about writings from the Middle Ages that said cinquefoil was a magic herb and it was used in potions and to find out who your secret lover might be. And it was also an ingredient used in fishing. It was used to bait fishing nets. Odd. I don't know that fish would have any interest in cinquefoil, but hey, I'll give it a try. I love to fish. Really odd thing is, speaking of weirdness, trout love garlic. We have a lot of rules and regulations and a lot of the trout waters around here. Some you can only use artificial flies. Some you can use natural bait. Basically, none of them let you use worms, which is crazy. I don't get it. I guess they didn't want people digging around the streams and ponds. That's the only thing I can figure. But when it comes to natural bait, you can use either like salmon eggs. Trout love those. Or you can use corn. Canned corn. That's what I grew up fishing with, canned corn. I caught a trout that was probably a state record lake trout if I had actually submitted it before I ate it. I mean, really one of the biggest trout I ever caught in North Carolina when I was like 10 years old on corn and a cork bobber and just, simple as can be, right? You don't have, another thing George Herder said is most of what's sold to fishermen it catches the fisherman, not the fish. In other words, there's a lot of garbage that is marketed in sporting goods stores when you can really catch most fish on just a cane pole, a hook, a line, and a little bobber. And sometimes that float's not even necessary. Split shot to weight, it's not necessary. I mean, it just depends on what you're fishing for and where. But you can get by with just a hook and a line, even, and fish with your hands if you didn't even have a cane pole. But anyway, if you take your canned corn and at least 24 hours before you go fishing, get some garlic powder and sprinkle in there, mix it up and let it sit. Trout love that stuff. I mean, I don't know what it is about garlic and corn for a trout that, I mean, it's certainly not part of their natural diet. They go crazy over it. So that's my little fishing tip for the day. Um, anyway, um, she even said, this is interesting. Now, this would be in the Middle Ages, I'm sorry. She said the concoction for this fish bait consists of corn boiled in thyme and margarine mixed with nettles, cinquefoil, and the juice of house leek, which is what we might call hens and chicks. It's a succulent. Um, they used to call it house leek for some reason. But that at that time would be well before corn was introduced to Europe. So they would have been using wheat. But yeah, isn't that amazing that the very similar to just local lore here in the mountains of North Carolina, hundreds of years later. All right, so I'll skip a lot of the more esoteric stuff and just get to medicinal actions and uses. It is astringent, febrifuge. Febrifuge means it reduces fevers. The roots are bitterish, styptic, meaning they can help staunch bleeding, but also slightly sweetish to the taste, a little bit sweet, and have been employed medicinally since the time of Hippocrates and Dioscorides. They were used to cure intermittent fevers, which prevailed in marshy, ill-drained lands. Okay, that means malaria. Malaria spread by mosquitoes. Robinson's Herbal directs that the roots are to be dug in April and the outer bark taken off and dried, the rest not being used. That's interesting. She says in modern herbal medicine, the dried herb is now more generally employed for its astringent and febrifuge properties. That, modern being 1930s. So, Brother Aloysius, going back to the German folk medicine tradition, used the Potentilla reptans, which means spreading. The root decoction is good for fixing loose teeth and for toothache, so again, it has astringent property. Leaves used for splitting blood, leukorrhea, stomach and intestinal cramps, bleeding, gravel, repressed menstruation, dysentery, jaundice, scurvy, dropsy, and alleviates infections of the kidney, bladder, and bleeding gums. Leaf tea also good as an eye wash for ulcerated or suppurating sores when steeped in boiled milk and taken hot. Cinquefoil was especially highly praised for cramps of the heart and chest. Wow. The Potentilla tormentilla, I guess. He said, he wouldn't be speaking Spanish, would he? Used for heavy bleeding, chronic diarrhea, blood spitting, ulcers from scurvy, and to quench thirst for diabetics. Good for heavy menstruation, hematuria, internal sores, bedwetting, and urinary incontinence. Yes, you will find this included in many old cures for bedwetting. Again, it says astringent quality. It's just going to tighten up the tissue of the urinary tract a little bit. Turning to the American tradition, we can start with the American Eclectic Materia Medica, which is the oldest American official herbal. And they had brought it over. They were using Potentilla tormentilla. They had not yet found, this is, 1600s, early 1700s. They had not yet found our natives. They said therapeutic action, the root of tormentilla is astringent and tonic and may be employed in all cases requiring the use of this class of agents. It is a pure and not unpleasant tasting astringent. It's really not bad at all. It's a pleasant tea, honestly. It is exhibited in relaxed and atonic states of the solids and also in cases of excessive mucus discharge. So it helped dry up mucus as well. By the 1860s, we were using Potentilla canadensis, resources of the southern fields and forests. It was growing plentifully in meadows in St. John's district of South Carolina. Said Dr. Keith Moore of Sumter informs me that this plant, on account of its bitter mucilaginous qualities, has been found by repeated experiment to be a most excellent and useful remedy in the treatment of colds. That word I can never say. I'm just going to spell it Phthis. The decoction used, which means essentially strong tea, boiled down. The Cherokee were very well aware of this. Plants of the Cherokee tells us they use cinquefoil as a mouthwash tea, using finely beaten roots to cure thrush, the rash that babies often get, or people who've been on a lot of antibiotics. Again, it's that soothing astringent quality. A tea of it is given in fevers that old-time ball players ate the root or bathed in the root tea to prevent injury. Now, okay, the night before the game, the ball player would chew the root for his wind or his get more breath, so he wouldn't get winded. Endurance, we'll just put it that way. The Cherokee had a very, very rough ball game. They're not talking baseball. They would beat the hell out of each other playing this. And they had a lot of kind of cures and remedies for bruises and sprains and broken bones that were often preventative. And you can understand that strongly astringent tea might help a little bit. Okay? But anyway, I'm not saying it has any athletically enhancing benefit, but the Cherokee thought it did. So, modern use, Plants for a Future gives us like the most brief entry in the entire database. Medicinal use of rough-fruited cinquefoil. That was the recta? Yeah, Potentilla recta. The whole plant is astringent. A poultice of the pounded leaves and stems has been applied to open sores and wounds. So, y'all, that's it. I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope you enjoyed the show. I know it was very different than usual, but, these are different circumstances. This is not, I was 5 years old, I guess, barely 5, maybe even still 4, but probably barely 5 when Reagan was shot. And I remember him, them taking him away, and of course, Brady was severely injured. Several people were injured. And he gave the thumbs up. He's getting in the car, and they think he's okay. They didn't even know he's shot. He didn't even know he's shot, right? And he starts kind of gurgling and spitting blood, and they realize the bullet had entered his lungs, and he almost died. This is not to be taken lightly. Had President Trump not turned his head, by the grace of God, at that very second, he would have been shot in the head like John Kennedy. Like I said, conservatives don't riot. Conservatives don't go burn and down in cities and loot businesses. But if I said to you, we were a half inch at most away from a civil war, that's something if it turns out that somebody knew this was going to happen and let it happen, and you think that's crazy, go do a little reading about the Oklahoma City bombing. I guess it was FBI agents that were kind of baiting Timothy McVeigh, were they pretending to be Iranians or Iraqis or something? It wouldn't be the first time. And that ain't going to end well for anybody. I don't want to see Biden or Trump or RFK Jr. Attacked, injured in any way. And that would be something we don't want to think about. We do not want to think about. Because I'm telling you, the police and the military will follow orders. And if the people don't, a lot of people are going to get hurt and killed and go to jail. Don't think just because your best friend is a cop, he's not going to follow orders on that day. That's what they're trained to do. That's what they're trained to do. And they got to feed their family too. They're not going to risk that. We came within a half inch of the worst nightmare scenario you can imagine. So anyway, y'all, have a good one. Remember, in a representative democracy, which is what our country is to a point now, we were founded as a republic. We were never supposed to be a democracy. We've become a representative democracy, supposedly. It's up to you. It's up to you. You're the one that's going to have to get out there and get your neighbors on the same page if possible. But if come November 6th, I guess it is, if Biden's reelected, look in the mirror and blame yourself, because it's up to you. And yeah, they're gonna cheat. Trump has to win bigger than they can cheat. I know you don't like to hear that. I know the mainstream media denies it. I am from North Carolina, from a family of Democrat politicians. Al Gore and John Edwards used to be family friends, okay? I can go down that list of senators and congressmen, and my family was very influential. If I tell you there's walking around money being handed out in election time, I'm not making it up. I'm not making it up at all. If I tell you ballot boxes tend to take little rides in the back seat of somebody's car and disappear for a while, if I tell you that, 64 people will vote registering their address for a vacant lot, or, one apartment somewhere, I am not making it up. And the dead vote, what do you expect? I mean, who else are the dead going to vote for except Joe Biden, who's half dead already? So, yeah, I'll leave it there, y'all. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.